It could have been anything that woke me up tonight. The balmy evening which had spurred us to open the windows before going to bed had given way to a midsummer thunderstorm in the middle of the night. This development, besides providing the anticipated sky clatter of thunderclaps, also sent ample wind and even a few stray raindrops rushing through our open bedroom windows. It could have been either of the two that woke me up tonight, maybe the strokes of thunder across the sky. My wife thinks it was the sudden cool brought on by the wind and water droplets making themselves guests in our house. But a distant part of me feels like it's been here before, and I have a vague hunch it was something else entirely that woke me up tonight. I rise halfway from my side of the bed, smiling as my wife's chest rises and falls to that slow rhythm that is characteristic of those who sleep. Her hair splayed on the pillowcase, her figure at peace, every line of stress and worry from the day having long since disappeared from her face. Though most would probably think the sight unremarkable, I find it picturesque. My dad taught me how to look at a person that way. It wasn't a lesson he taught in words, but one taught with how he held my mother, and watched after her longingly when he couldn't. He never acted like he owned her, he only ever cherished her. He was the one who showed me how to value simplicity, and it's because of him, I suppose, that I cherish my sweetheart the way I do now. I brush a wandering strand of hair from my wife's eyes, and pull the comforter up further around her shoulders. Our comforter. My hands linger on the blanket's border as I finish my task, delayed by the effect of a sudden memory coming to mind. This comforter was a gift from my parents shortly after our wedding, part of a full set of bedding. It was no huge sacrifice for them to provide it, but it meant the world to us, newlyweds who had little more by way of possessions than our joined meager wages, a small apartment, some personal items, and each other. I remember as my mother handed the sheets and comforter to us that day, my dad explained that they would do us a lot more good than the thin emergency blankets we were using at that point. My wife and I have progressed quite a bit since then. We have our own house now, a higher salary on my part instead of joint minimum wages, and even new bedding. But something that has remained on our bed every night since is this comforter. It meant a lot to us then, and it means a lot to us now. I guess not everything changes. That thought lingers uneasily in my mind. Not everything changes. Though my eyes are swollen with sleep, that thought prevents exhaustion from taking hold of me for the moment. I chuckle fondly at the sight of my wife and the memory of our comforter, then finally arise from the bed. Only moments ago I promised her I'd close the windows in the house to keep out the wind and water, and I wouldn't want her to awake again to find the promise unfulfilled. Beginning with our own bedroom windows, I start to close the house up. Window by window, working my way from the bedroom to the hallway, then to the kitchen. It's a mundane action, but there is some feeling in the air tonight that makes it seem special, weighted with some sort of distant significance. At long last arriving in my den, I stride towards the glass pane to finish the job, but I'm stopped by the rolling echo of thunder outside. It was definitely closer this time, not near enough for me to feel threatened or even to awake my slumbering sweetheart in the other room, but close enough to surprise me nonetheless. It had sounded so much further off just seconds ago. Crazy how things that seem so distant can so quickly come back to you and catch you off guard with their presence. My gaze wanders out the window into the darkened street, into the world of water and storms. As I do so, a gentle roll of thunder signals the arrival of another memory, carrying with it a full weight of sentiment. Yes, as I had thought earlier, I had indeed been in this night before. It was many years ago, or not so many, depending on how you look at it, when I was a boy, barely old enough to walk around the block unaccompanied by either my old man or my mom. There was a midnight thunderstorm. That detail is certainly vivid enough. But there was something else, too. Something different from how I feel now. A distinct feeling of fear. Then the memory comes rushing back to me in clear focus. I was afraid. Having been awoken by a strong and booming ruckus outside, my boy self had worked its way out of the bedroom of my childhood, timid and apprehensive, drawn by some fearful curiosity to the front window, where I knew I would be able to get sight of whatever dreaded thing had made that noise. I already knew what had made that noise. It was the sky, it was the thunder, but it was not only that. In my boyish mind, it was also anger, and a distinct and real danger. I was not used to anger in my life. Some kids I knew had gotten the lion's share of it from their parents, and you could see it in the bruises on their faces or the somber looks in their eyes when their parents scolded them from the doorstep during summer evening playtime. Sure, I knew what basic, firm discipline was from my own mom and dad, but their discipline was never unreasonably harsh, and they both, especially my dad, had always been gentle and somehow even patient with me. So these sky noises, this terrible, boisterous thunder, was one of my only experiences with anything threatening or deafening that came to intrude on my innocence. I had tiptoed towards the window, unable to make out details of the street outside, not caring whether I could or not, more entranced by whatever imminent flash of anger was about to manifest in the sky. When the lightning did strike and the thunder sounded, I let out a high-pitched yelp, regretting it immediately. I threw my hands over my mouth and looked fearfully towards the hallway, where I knew my parents had surely heard me from their room. I glanced around the room, and noting the lack of any decent hiding place, I rolled onto the couch and closed my eyes, figuring in my foolish logic that my parents would assume I was just asleep and disregard the outburst I'd made. One thing was for certain, I didn't need to be scolded at this hour of night, not with how afraid I already was of the stormy symphony being played outside. Soon enough, I heard the steady footsteps of my dad coming out of his room and going the opposite way down the hall. I heard my bedroom door creak open, and after a pause it closed again, and I could hear my dad's footsteps working their way down the hallway towards the living room where I now lay. Oh, he must have realized I wasn't in my room and come looking for me. As expected, the familiar sound of his steps arrived in the living room, where they halted for a moment near the couch I lay on, but then they doubled back on themselves. I squinted cautiously to see if I could discern my dad amongst the shadows of the living room. Sure enough, he was there, but he was standing by the front window looking out on the stormy scene outside. He stood there for a moment, and despite the darkness of the room, I could perceive that he looked contemplative. He was thinking, mulling something over between lightning flashes and thunderstrokes. Suddenly he spoke, but in a voice that was quite the opposite of scolding. "If only you were here to see this, son. Storms like these are their own kind of beautiful, and nights like these their own kind of calm." His words piqued my curiosity. I opened my eyes, figuring that because he was turned outwards to the window, he wouldn't see that I was awake. "Although," he continued, still gazing into the sky, "I didn't think so when I was your age. Nights like these downright terrified me." At hearing that, I was shocked. My dad? Afraid of stormy nights? I'd never seen him be afraid of anything, especially not the things I was afraid of. I silently leaned up on one arm, letting my curiosity overpower my caution. "I don't know what I was afraid of," he said. "Maybe that a bolt of lightning would hit me, or maybe it was just how loud the thunder was." He turned from the window towards me, catching me, leaning on my arm with my eyes open. In the little light there was in the room, I saw none of the sternness I expected to see on his face, but rather only an understanding little smile that matched the sympathetic tone of his voice. "But I was scared too," he finished. I gave up on the ruse and sat up straight. He walked across the room towards me, and only then did I realize that he was carrying in one arm the red and blue superhero comforter from my bed. He must have had it the whole time he was here in the living room with me. I guess he must have actually gone in my bedroom and brought it out with him, expecting to find me here. Sitting down next to me on the couch, he wrapped the comforter around my shoulders. It was worn and ragged, but it was my favorite, and I let my mom know it whenever she insisted on getting me new bedclothes. I could see love mingling with exhaustion in my dad's eyes as he finished wrapping me in the blanket and gave me a soft pat on the shoulder. "How are you feeling, son?" he inquired. "Scared," I mumbled. "I understand that. Why are you scared?" "I don't know, because I hate the noises the sky makes during these storms, and when they happen at night I feel like I'm by myself because you and Mom are asleep." He nodded. Sometimes things that wouldn't normally scare us can terrify us if we feel like we're alone. "Are you normally scared of thunderstorms during the day?" "No, I guess not, because I'm normally with you or Mom, and at night, I'm not." "Well, I want you to know something. You're never alone during scary times like this. Not even at nighttime, because your mother and I are always right across the hall. But I also want you to know that it's okay to feel afraid. What's important is that you don't let being afraid change how you act and who you are. And when you realize that, you can enjoy moments like this that might otherwise scare you. He smiled, seeming even more tired now, but no less loving, and stood slowly. Sauntering back towards the window, he reached out his hand and beckoned for me to join him. I made my way to him, still cautious, but less afraid this time. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and together we stood, father wrapped in bathrobe and child wrapped in colored superhero comforter, appreciating the lightning jumping between clouds and the ensuing rolls of thunder. I don't know how long we stood at that window, but I know that I walked away no longer afraid of thunderstorms. A clap of thunder pulls me from the memory, bearing me back from my boyhood years to the present, where once again I am standing at a window gazing into a stormy night, but in much different circumstances. I sigh. Crazy how things that seem so distant can so quickly come back to you and catch you off guard with their presence. But things change. That much is obvious in the course my life has taken. I'm a man now. The woman I love is asleep down the hall. I'm no longer afraid of thunder, and I'm standing at this window alone. What was it my dad had said to me all those years ago? That I'd never be alone because he and my mother would just be right across the hall? Well, some promise that was, because now Mom is far away and Dad is gone. And at that, I feel the warm wetness of a tear roll down my cheek. Maintaining my gaze into the sky, I raise my hand and touch the trail left on my face. That's right. Things do change. You're gone, Dad, and I'm standing at this window in a thunderstorm by myself, because you're not here. But then the thought from earlier tonight comes back to me with subtle force. Not everything changes. What could that thought even mean in this situation, not everything changes? Shaking off the confusion of the question, I close the window that had been the portal to such a sentimental memory and begin my voyage back to the bedroom. Meandering down the hall, I find myself unintentionally passing the bedroom and coming to the hallway's terminus underneath the attic door. It had been quite some time since I'd had reason to come to the attic, and now that I'm here, I feel prompted to pay the place a visit. I work the mechanism to pull down the ladder, and I slowly climb up into the space above. It smells musty, and everything is covered in a significant layer of dust, but for some reason being here right now feels right. It must just be that kind of night. I've been up for too long, too late, and I'm starting to lose myself. I glance back down the attic steps to the ground level, ready to go back down, when that earlier thought again intrudes on my sleepy mind. Not everything changes. That thought again converts my mind from sleepy to sentimental, and I take a couple of token steps through the dust on the floor, towards the few boxes and knickknacks that we have stored up here. I wander past boxes of old home supplies and wedding gifts. I hesitate at the sight of the white wooden crib a carpenter friend of ours had made in preparation for the birth of our child some time ago. The crib ended up not being necessary, and although keeping it visible in the house was much too painful at times, we safeguarded it up here in case it ever became relevant again. That wound took quite some time to heal. I can't guarantee that it even has completely healed. I continue, wandering past that crib and its associated scar, and come to something that hits me with the same weight of feeling that my earlier memory of my father at the window did. Neatly propped up in a stand, but long forgotten between boxes and assorted carpentry, is an acoustic guitar. I crouch down to analyze its dust-laden surface, the pains of either tiredness or age noticeable in my various joints. Despite it being left so long forsaken, the guitar still seems to be in prime condition. None of the strings have snapped with tension, nor is it lacking any of its tuning keys. The same prompting which has driven me through this house tonight is what now drives me to reach out and pick up the forlorn instrument. The texture of the neck in my hand and the weight of the body seems surprisingly familiar. I scan the room for anything to clean off the dirty artifact, and finding a withered rag, I gingerly wipe off the remaining grime from its surface. Although the guitar certainly has its own weight, my arms feel almost lighter holding it. I breathe deeply and pluck one of the strings. Not quite in tune, but I'm surprised that at the same time it really doesn't sound too far off. Strumming the rest of the strings, I see that none of them are quite in key, but none are terribly out of key either. I start the work of tuning the instrument, carefully tightening or loosening each key in turn. At length, the guitar is brought back into its proper musical balance. The whole process has been somewhat mesmerizing to me. I find myself drifting into some kind of nostalgic haze, although I can't place the precise source of the feeling. I disregard it, and having tuned this old guitar, I finger a chord with my left hand and bring my right fingers down over the strings. The harmony that issues from the instrument's core is almost unnaturally warm and rich. The incessant tapping of raindrops on the roof diminishes little by little. My fingers continue their course, eventually strumming out a song that could not have been remembered by my mind, but that my heart must have been holding on to for quite some time. Right on cue, another tide of memory threatens to sweep me out to whatever sea of longing I've been wading through tonight. I make a token effort to resist, then let it carry me away as my hands and fingers continue their playing of the song. Like before, I am taken back to when I was younger, but not so young as when a dad taught a boy about fear and thunderstorms while they stood huddled by a window. This time, I see that boy again, and he is youthful, yes, but with the first well-developed foreshadowings of adulthood in his face and figure. I see him, I see me, perched on a stool by a familiar couch side on which my dad sat reclined. The music my hands are bringing from the guitar in the present world meld with this memory as I realize that my young self also held a guitar in hand and was picking out the same melody I did now. The tune was soothing and bright, and I could see that as my young self played it, my dad seemed to relax deeper and deeper into his seat on the couch. Then I noticed how different he looked from my first memory I'd revisited tonight. He seemed more grizzled and more gray, more tired and more lean, and in 100 ways more old. That's right, Dad was sick now. His health had started spiraling downward with the onset of my teenage years. He had taught me how to play some simple melodies on his own acoustic guitar years before, and he was grateful for it later when its music was one of the few things that could draw his mind from the pain it was so hard for him to not sink into, given his condition. I played him that song, the song of a son for his father. As he had shown me not to fear the thunder, I would show him not to fear the future, or to drown in the distress of the moment. But even then I knew that we would not have many more guitar therapy sessions together. As my dad eased further into the couch, and as I continued to play the subdued tones of that song, the haze of memory lifts, and brings me back to my attic, where I still sit plucking out that same son's eloquent piece for his father. But here I sit amidst nothing but grimy boxes. My cheeks are wet now, the subtle tears of earlier long gone, and the weight of this last memory taking effect through hearty crying. I let the guitar fall to the floor where the force of wood against wood lets out a resonant protest. I could hear the rain on the roof again, and I match it with my own doleful tears. It all changed, but I could not have known as a boy that the security I had in my relationship with my father would be so grimly ripped from me. I couldn't have anticipated any of it. But I guess that's the nature of change. It comes when and how you least expect it. As I let myself give in to despondency, a familiar thought intrudes again into my heart. Not everything changes. Distant things come back to you and catch you off guard with their presence. That's certainly true. I wasn't expecting any of this voyage of emotion when I left my room to shut the windows against the storm minutes or hours ago. I'm not even sure how long anymore. But I'm noticing something now, something poking out of the box across from where I'm kneeling. A ragged red and blue fabric corner. Could it be... I reach out and tug it from its resting place, and the remaining fabric slithers out smoothly. Sewn into the design of the fabric, barely discernible through all the rips and dirt, are some of my favorite childhood superheroes. This is my superhero comforter. The one my dad put on me that night he sat with me in the thunderstorm. I shudder, hit by a feeling that, in any other context, would make me feel haunted, but given the events of tonight and my current mindset, put me at ease, consoled somehow, but still with an urge to do something. A sort of calm urgency, if that even makes sense. A feeling of some purpose to the series of events that have transpired this evening, ever since I awoke during the storm. Lifting my old comforter, the reason for this evening's journey begins to come clearer in my mind. And I know what I'm meant to do. No, it's not that. It's that I know what I want to do. Something I haven't done in too long. Throwing the blanket like a rag doll over my shoulder, I lift the guitar from where I cast it away on the floor and carry it gingerly down the attic steps, closing the door softly behind me. The sound of tires on gravel marks my arrival at my destination. It only took a few minutes to get here. There's no traffic on the main roads this time of night, and I live close by anyway. Slowly, purposefully, I turn off the ignition and leave my seat in my Dodge Plymouth. It's an ancient car, but I guess this evening has all but proved my draw to things that remind me of the past. The thunder still echoes through the sky, although the rain has let up. That being said, I feel that it will start pouring again at any moment. This second of relative solace, with only lightning and its resounding thunder to keep me company, is merely temporary. So I know that I need to take advantage of it. I didn't bring an umbrella with me. For some foolish reason, I thought I knew I wouldn't need it. With old superhero blanket and guitar in tow, I make my way to the wrought iron gate. The community police force doesn't exactly prefer people making nighttime visits to this place, but they also don't exactly enforce it heavily. Although the vehicle entrance is padlocked closed, the pedestrian walkway lies bare of any impediment barring my entry, so I use it to make my passage to the field on the other side of the fence. In the light of day, it would be a rather remarkable field. In all its simplicity, it is rather picturesque. A few decades-old oak and willow trees interspersed throughout, and gray polished headstones, providing a solid backdrop for colorful bouquets of roses and lilies resting thereon. But in the dark gray of this night, I can hardly notice any of that. My feet and muscle memory from my last visit much too long ago guide me to where I first set out to get to. A third of the way through this resting place, I see it. A double-sided hook arising from the ground, supporting a small pot of flowers on one side and a bundle of thin wind chimes on the other. Below this memento lies a small and unassuming headstone, flat against the ground. I near it, eventually standing directly above it. The wind chimes, interestingly enough, make no sound on the hook, the firm gusts of wind that have been constant throughout the night having disappeared for the time being. I set the guitar beside myself on the ground, easing my arm of its weight, and wrap the red and blue blanket around myself. Collapsing to my knees, I trace the letters on the little headstone. My dad's headstone. Feeling even more encompassed by feelings than I have at any point before now tonight. He didn't last many years after that day I played guitar for him by the couch. Not long after he and Mom gave my wife and I the wedding comforter, he was already on his way out of this world. The breeze at that moment begins to pick up, and the wind chimes on the hook start to make a solemn but gentle tune. The thunder strengthens in the distance. I sigh and lift the guitar to support it on my thigh, taking its neck in my left hand. Sadness still present and intermingled with nostalgia, I begin to strum that same familiar melody I played in the attic earlier, and that boy had played for his father so many years ago. As the music progresses, the sky picks up with its own music. The thunder seems close, and it calls to mind the memory that hit me at the window tonight, when my dad stood with me during the thunderstorm, and he pulled my favorite blanket around me. I shuffle my shoulders a little, drawing that same blanket around myself as I continue playing for him. Despair starts to intensify, and tears again well in my eyes, as I remember playing for my dad so many times while he lay on the couch, and also remembering when he finally laid down to rest in this same plot of ground where I'm kneeling now. The melody I play is picking up now, and I feel my dad's words more in my heart than I do hear them in my mind. I also want you to know that it's okay to feel afraid. What's important is that you don't let being afraid change how you act and who you are. And when you realize that, you can enjoy moments like this that might otherwise scare you. His words from that fateful night echo through my mind. I'm scared, that's it. That's why it's been so long since I've come to visit him here. I never fully grieved, I was scared to feel. At that realization, through the continuous strumming music my hands bring from the guitar, the winds pick up and prompt the chimes on the grave hook to play more prominently, actually drawing my gaze up towards them. Not everything changes. The thought crosses through my mind again, finally at the verge of being understood. I pluck the guitar strings with greater purpose now, and now in a voice that is so familiar and so gentle and so firm, I hear, "Distant things come back to you and catch you off guard with their presence." Slowing the music down to a gentle crawl, I look around for the source of that voice, but see nothing. Thunder echoes distantly, then suddenly very close. I see my father's face materialize clearly in my mind, and even though he's not in front of my eyes, he's more crystal clear than I've ever seen him in my memories. I can visualize him smiling, and only lightly feel what might be his hand, or might be my shivering pulling the blanket closer around my shoulders. Another roll of thunder sounds, very far away this time. I'm sitting here in front of my dad's resting place with his guitar wrapped in my superhero blanket. For a moment, I'm not a man, but a boy, a son. And in this moment, I realize what woke me up tonight. It could have been the thunder, or the rain, or the wind rushing through our house, or even my wife asking me to close the windows. But what really woke me up tonight, and what brought me through these corridors of memory to my knees at this little knoll, was my dad. The thunder and the rain and the music of this guitar were all just a medium he could work through to bring me to him so I could finally feel this. And now I sit here sobbing, playing what may as well be a timeless song of sons for their fathers. Nothing more than a boy wrapped in an old beloved blanket, sitting at his dad's feet. And even through the tears of this moment, I'm starting to see I'm not afraid anymore. Hedged about memories of an empty crib in the attic and a sick father on a couch drift away. I'm not afraid of the future. I'm not afraid of the past. I'm not afraid of thunder. And I'm not afraid of visiting him here. I hurt because I love him, and I cry because I miss him. And I think that's okay. Dad, I've been distant from you for a long time, and I'm sorry for that. But it's okay now, because you've come rushing back to me and caught me off guard with your presence. I love you, Dad, and I'm not afraid. And now I know that those are some of the things that never have to change.